Greetings, citizens. I am your host, jvoodoochild, and this is Manor after its massive patch 0.8.035. To me, this is practically a new game, and so I am coming back to the basics and just reviewing my understanding of this game and kind of throwing out my old assumptions to how I approach playing this game and some of the opening moves that I make typically in a campaign, and just revisiting kind of all those decisions and reproving them out one by one. Earlier today, I was looking at some content, and the advice that they were giving, this, I don't know, kind of did not seem optimal to me. So I wanted to create my own video and kind of discuss some of the things that were definitely lacking in that video, but just also kind of review some of the different options that we have available to us. So let us dive right into it. What is the first building you should build in most every campaign? And there might be variances based on the resources, the type of map, and the type of opponents, but I would think for the majority of the games, at least on the kind of default, basic, moderate settings as difficulty, you're pretty much going to be doing the same things over and over again. But how it plays out after that kind of second or maybe third phase of buildings may be dependent on more of those map variables and whatnot. So when I first started playing this game, basically when it was released to the public, one of the things that I kind of considered as important is getting the resources off the ground. And so every game starts off with 8 logs, and typically most of the kind of options that we'll be discussing today will require 2 logs. And so there are 4 different things that you can kind of build from the starting group of logs. And one of those has to be the logging camp itself, because that's how you generate more logs. And your game will obviously stall out if you don't have one of those in your starting 4 or 5 buildings. And so that's a must. But is it the first building that you build? There are some strong indications of why you might want to do that, and we'll kind of discuss that earlier. But originally, I was thinking that the granary might be the very first building that I build, mainly because it has a higher requirements than any of the others, and that it also requires 10 stone, and which I have 20 sitting on the ground over here. Now, at the start of every game, we have 10 people, husband and a wife, in 5 different families up here. And one of them will start guiding the ox around and grabbing logs and taking it to the places that we decide to build. And so that meant 9 free people that can start hauling those stones over there, and kind of, since that was the highest requirement of resources to build, I wanted to get that down first before there were options about how to employ these people and, reduce my building force, because they're currently all unassigned families to have jobs. And that lasted a short time, because one of the other things that I mentioned is we just have 2 people in each of these families. And the maximum in typical for this game, once you get rolling, is 3. And you will only get that third, that male child son, once you build a Burgess. And once they move into that spot, then they will have a new family arrive ready to join the workforce. And so to increase my workforce by 50%, that became the priority for my approach to the game up until this patch. Now, this patch has introduced some other aspects, and one of the major ones is we no longer have a development screen. This is our development screen, and instead of having different options, which a couple of buildings were locked behind, we have like this origins options here, which will unlock once we have 5 Burgesses built. And one of the buildings that I really liked in the old system, but would only build it occasionally based on the resources that I had going for me, was the charcoal kiln. And this basically doubles our firewood. And one of the nice things about a later patch was when you build your market spaces, you can declare what goes into those spaces. And so you can leave out firewood and have it never used as a maintenance resource for any of your buildings or any of your families. And so that was nice. So now I get to have 100% use of the charcoal, and the charcoal basically for some labor force doubles the firewood collected. And so it means less trees I have to cut down, the less time, at least on that side. By the time I cut down a firewood and converted to charcoal, I'm saving trees, basically. I'm spending the same amount of time and resources, but I'm saving trees, and that has options, in the late game. But also, one of the things is I can sell charcoal, even though it is a major trade thing that you have to unlock with some resources. But it sells for 3 for each charcoal, and the firewood sells for 1. So I believe it costs 30 to get set up, and that works out nicely because typically one of the things that people do is they buy an ox for 20, so leaving 30 over. Once I get the trade post up and running, I can unlock that trade for charcoal and start selling each firewood instead of 1 as 6. And so that's a nice increase, and generally is my go-to money income source to kind of get going with other things that I may want to do for that particular campaign. And so that was all locked behind development points and no longer. So I'm now considering making that my first building, and probably the logging camp as my second building. And that way I can build logs for whatever is next. Now, I haven't quite decided if I want to do 2 Burgesses there, or if I want to kind of go back to the storehouse and granary setup. And I'll like to talk a little bit about that. Now, with building the charcoal first, and because it has 3 worker slots, I want to move all 3 workers in there as quickly as possible, and that way I can convert that 20 firewood into the 40 charcoal as quickly as possible, and that way I can free up that workforce to go do other things. But because of that delay in my workforce, I have not found that I can get 6 living spaces opened up by the time the month ends. And the only thing preventing us from, on at least normal difficulty, from expanding into a 6th family at the start of the next month is homelessness. and it's not showing up right now because I'm paused, but these homeless families will drop this below 50 very quickly. And so it doesn't, I'm not going to get that sixth family on the next month. So whether I want to set up the granary and the storehouse next and kind of get the labor going to get those off the ground. So have 3 in the charcoal going, and then 1 in, like, say, the granary, if that's the third building that I build, or maybe even the second building. And then once the charcoal is done, move those 3 people over into the logging camp, and there's a reason for that. And once the bread is picked up off the ground, move that person over into the storehouse to pick up the rest of these supplies here. And always leave 1 person behind to build the other things. Now, one of the other changes to this game is that we have a cost and upkeep on certain buildings to include the tool, as we see here. And we start off with 10 tools, as we see up above here, and 1 to build this. And once it's built, anytime it has someone working in it, whether it's 1 person or 3 people or 3 families, it will incur a yearly maintenance of 1 tool. And as soon as you pull all the workers out of there, the maintenance pauses at wherever it left off. And so you could leave it empty for an entire year, and you would not incur that yearly maintenance costs. But as soon as you put 1 worker in there, that timer starts clicking again as whatever remaining time you had in the year. Now, if you move it or relocate it, which is no additional costs as you see here, it will end that maintenance cycle for that year. And that will be the cost of the new location. So if I got this built and then I moved it, I would have 8 tools remaining. So this tool requirement has also changed some of the way I want to approach things. And that if I'm paying for the maintenance, I want to get the most use out of that time that is taken away from, my supply before the next cost and maintenance in a limited supply. So I'm going to put all 3 workers in there, and I'm going to chop down the trees that will get me to the count of logs that I want for the next phase of building. And so that's also another reason why I'm considering using these 8 logs for charcoal, logging camp, granary, and storehouse. And that way, all I need after that is just logs for residences. And, I guess it's, 10 or 12 logs regardless of the build order. And there is something to be said for at least getting 2 sons out in the workforce for everything else. But with the family counts, I don't know. It doesn't make a difference. And so I guess, building the homes is probably the first thing I should do. At least that's really the ultimate recommendation, because getting the extra labor force to go do stuff is more important than getting stuff off the ground quickly, because really you have plenty of time to get it off the ground without any risk of losing any of it, at least on normal difficulty. So, there is another major tip that I'd like to share with you all in this video. And that is, whatever you put down first, that's where the ox is going to drag its first log to. And let's go over here and build on the other side. The charcoal, and we're going to set this to highest priority, and we're going to set this to lowest priority. And for kicks, we are going to throw in a granary. And this ox is going to pick up the log, and say going to the highest priority, say going to the medium priority, it's going to drop off his log in the lowest priority, because this was the first thing we put down on the ground as far as planning. This ox has an order to go to that, and only after it is set it down will it think, okay, what is the next thing I need to do? And at that point, it's going to go to the highest priority. Now, this ox is on the way. So I'm going to change this to medium. In fact, let's just do it to low. And we'll change this to highest. And we'll see where the ox goes next. So it's got a new order now. It knows where it's going. Up to the granary. So that is something to kind of be aware of. And so if you're kind of plotting out your roads or whatever, you can put this on the ground, build your roads around it, and then remove it, and that ox will not consider it as the first objective. It'll go to whatever you lay down first. That requires a log, regardless of priorities. Now, the second log will pay attention to the priorities, because at that point, the game has been running for some period of time in order for those to kind of be considered on the next order that goes to the ox. Something else, in that if you have logs laying on the ground, whether it's in a supply point like this or cut down in the forest, that ox is going to prioritize loose logs in the woods, and then, and only then, logs in a supply point. And then last will be logs that are being stored in the logging camp. So even though you may place this in a strategic area for, short routes to its destination, if you got people working in here and cutting down, stuff over here, that ox is going to go out to that nearest log in this area, grab it, and then go to its destination on where it's sending that log. So that's something to keep in mind as far as this. And probably the greatest time sink in this game is just distance between logs and new buildings, and also resources and those new buildings, or your food sources from your granary, or your firewood from the storehouse, and then also from the storehouse to the marketplace, or granary into the marketplace. All those kind of moving about. How close is your church when, someone decides to go pray? How close is your tavern when someone goes to drink? How close is the firewood market from your house when someone goes to get the monthly firewood? The water source, all that good stuff. Those travel times are taken away from your labor force. And so you kind of want to reduce those whenever possible and kind of, take that into account as far as your building order, where you're doing things, and, what are you setting up side by side with activities. Let's kind of keep those kind of supply chain triangles in mind when placing buildings. So I believe that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Thank you all for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If so, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. And please share with me your comments on, what is your first building? Are you instead doing these, getting the ox out in first, so you can get that second ox from wandering away? Is this your first building? Is your first building instead a workers camp? I have fish, so I don't have the work, but if you've got small game out there, is this your first build? Do you want to get that resource going quickly? Do you want to get the forestry hunt going? How close is that going to be to your mushrooms? Well, my mushrooms is very far away, so, but do you want to get that next to your berries or mushrooms if they were like right here? Do you want to get that building going forward first so you can get a worker in there and start, getting those resources before they cap out and you lose something? With the fish, you always have a month to go. So this will not max out. I think it's 40% now instead of 50. So you're getting less fish as far as every new month, but it's still only 3 cycles. I believe the mushrooms and the berries are growing until fall. So throughout summer and spring, obviously. And then starting at fall, they start to decrease. They don't go to 0 until winter. So, they have longer cycles. And in the very early beginning, food's not important. Food is only important to this number as far as keeping enough supply going to feed the family for the next month and not run into starvation issues for your approval. But also with expansion, from a level 1 to a level 2 Burgess and, 2 to 3. Those are the only times those types of requirements are necessary. So getting out to them isn't a priority for me, but may be priority for you. Please share with the comments, your approach to this game and your thoughts on the patch overall. So thank you all for watching. Take care. Bye.